my screen. Meeting is being recorded. So hello, welcome, and thank you for joining us today for the Carbon Leadership Forum's 2020 webinar series and the last one of the year. I am Anthony Hickling, and I'm the Managing Director of the CLF. And this is the 5th session of our regular webinar series. Today, we're going to have a few speakers talking about just general kind of embodied carbon highlights from 2020. And as you just saw a little pop-up on your screen, this webinar is being recorded and will be made publicly available upon its completion. So to give a quick intro of what the Carbon Leadership Forum is before we start diving into the highlights from the year, we're just going to start and explain kind of that the Carbon Leadership Forum is a program at the University of Washington and connects its members from architects, engineers, contractors, material suppliers, building owners, policymakers, and associations through our robust online community forum, active focus groups, versioning regional hubs, NGO roundtable, and others. And together we contribute to and access research projects and a resource library and connect a vibrant, interactive group of people to events, webinars, and actively engage in member-led initiatives. So the network has evolved into a vibrant, engaged global community. To date, we are over 6,500 professionals from across the building sector, academia, nonprofit, and government groups, representing 200 cities from 33 countries across the world. This collective action model is dedicated to accelerating the transformation of the building sector to radically decarbonize buildings and building materials through collective action. The network comprises many subject-specific focus groups, which members can join for additional engagement around a topic related to embodied carbon. The network has these focus groups that we were just mentioning in our kind of online community forum. So buildings, construction, education. This is kind of adapting and growing to people's needs. So if you log into the CLF community, sometimes you'll find other things that you could be engaging with. And to dig in a little bit about our regional hubs, we're excited about this growing global movement of volunteers engaging in a range of platforms, including the new online community forum that I mentioned, as well as focus groups and regional hubs. So starting with Trailblazers in Vancouver, New York, and San Francisco, we now have launched 29 new hubs. And the most recent one is coming from Alberta, Canada. So please consider connecting via this online forum to join the focus groups, regional hubs, and engage in dynamic dialogue about embodied carbon. Carbon Leadership Forum is funded and managed at the University of Washington, and we bring together a cross-section of building industry focused on radically reducing and ultimately eliminating embodied carbon. Carbon Leadership Forum, as I mentioned at the beginning, we conduct research, develop resources, convene a network, and incubate member-led initiatives, and all of this is made possible in part from the sponsors that you're seeing on this screen. So this webinar is going to be moderated by Victoria Herrero Garcia. She volunteers for the CLF as the webinar coordinator and works for a firm based in Denver, Colorado called Ambient Energy as a sustainability consultant and whole building LCA analyst.
Unmute. Thank you, Anthony. Hello, everyone. Again, today's webinar is the 5th session of our regular webinar series. Our goal is that each session will not only be useful to live participants, but also to serve as a free educational resource for everyone. So feel free to share with your network and coworkers, colleagues, professionals, and students. And the CLF resources website, you will find all the existing recordings. Next slide, please. Mention of trade names or commercial products does not include endorsements or recommendation for use. Please note the opinions, ideas, products, or data presented by speakers in these sessions do not represent members of the Carbon Leadership Forum, Carbon Leadership Network, or constitute endorsement by the network. Although today we have 2 Carbon Leadership Forum speakers as well. Our goal is to introduce topics that could help participants think and talk about building industry strategies for reducing carbon emissions attributed to building materials. Next slide, please. So a few things about the presentation today. We are trying to use a different format. So we will have each presenter talk for about 5 to 8 minutes, and then we will have a few minutes for Q&A for each presenter. And after we conclude the presentations or updates, there will be a 20 to 30 minutes, whatever time is left, for an open discussion Q&A. We suggest that you send all your questions through the chat, and we're going to try a new thing as well. If you want to have a speaker role, like if you want to ask the question directly or make a comment or suggestion, please include in the chat box stack. You write a stack, and we know, Anthony and I will know that you want to speak and ask your question. So please do so. Write the question if you don't want to speak, stack if you want to ask something. And if you missed any of the webinar recordings, you can go to the CLF website and find them there. So here is an overview of our speakers today. We have Monica Juan with the Carbon Leadership Forum, and Michael Greniak. I always have troubles, Mike, with your last name, Greniak,
Yeah, it's
I
pronounced
think.
Smith. Yes.
Thank you, Greniak. And with Le Mesurier, and Megan Lewis as well with the Carbon Leadership Forum. Megan is one of the latest staff member of the CLF. She started like a couple of months ago, I think, Megan. So welcoming Megan as well to the CLF. And let's start with our webinar then. So next slide, please. Oh, Monica, you can start putting your slides up. So Monica Juan is a research engineer for the Carbon Leadership Forum at the University of Washington with expertise in environmental life cycle assessment, LCA. Recent research topics include the environmental impact of housing, optimizing tall wood structures, and developing data on the environmental impact of earthquake damage. She was also the lead author for a guide on the use of LCA in design and construction practice. She will be talking today about the CLF's wood carbon seminars, which she coordinated. Monica?
Okay, thank you, Victoria. All right, so the wood carbon seminars, they were a series of 8 webinars that we held earlier this year between April through June. We had 4 main topics. As you can see here, in each topic, we had a presentation session that had 3 presentations, and then a follow-up discussion session where Kate Simonin led a panel type discussion with the speakers in the following week. So I'm not going to go into each of the webinars or the presentations, but instead I'm going to talk about what were the big takeaways or recurring themes that I picked up on. And I'm a total wood novice, so maybe I didn't catch everything, but I'm just going to share what I thought was interesting and stood out to me. And just to note, we were focused on wood that was legally harvested in the US from working forests, which are forests that are dedicated to producing wood products. So we weren't talking about primary or old growth forests or illegal logging or anything like that. So top takeaways and recurring themes. The first thing that I learned was that US forests have been regrowing steadily since the end of the Industrial Revolution. So we do not have a deforestation scenario in the US. Instead, we are gaining trees, not losing trees. So that's good news. The next one was the importance of forest management. A lot of the speakers emphasized this. For example, this picture on the right from Elaine O'Neill from Quorum shows how, on the picture on the left shows forest growth with management, and the picture on the right shows forest growth without management. And you can see how the picture on the right, the forest looks like it's more prone to forest fires or disease. So just really hammering home the point of forest management. And another thing that I thought was really interesting was the idea that it makes economic sense for forest owners to practice sustainable forest management. And that's because sustainable forests last longer, produces more wood, and you get a return on your investment. So I thought that that made sense to me. And this is something that makes sense in the US with the laws that we have in the market and so forth. Another recurring theme that multiple speakers talked about was how demand for wood products, like economic demand for wood products, drives investment in forest planting and forest management. And just using wood products helps keep forest as forest, as opposed to forest land being converted to some other use. And this is supported by empirical evidence and modeling studies. So this was a recurring theme that a lot of speakers talked about. Another important takeaway that I found was that we should avoid using the term carbon neutral or carbon neutrality, even though we see it a lot. And it's because this term can be overly simplistic, and instead what we should pay attention to is the actual carbon flux of a forest. What's the net gain or emissions. We also learned about certification, chain of custody, fiber sourcing, what all of those terms mean. So we learned that certification in general is great, but forests can also be responsibly managed even if they're not certified. For example, in the case of small landowners, since certification can be kind of expensive, so even if your wood isn't certified, doesn't necessarily mean it's unsustainable. So something to keep in mind. Next slide. And then we also learned about kind of the nuances between individual forests. Even though the US as a whole has a forest regrowth situation, individual stands might be different. We learned about the difference between climate smart forestry, carbon friendly forestry. An example of this difference is like invasive species might be carbon sequestering intensive, but they might not be good for the overall health of the forest, which then isn't good for climate change. So talked about the potential of bringing individual forest carbon data to the product level, which I think is what people are looking for, but not quite there yet. But there's work being done for that. So if you look at all of these recurring themes and what the speakers were saying, talking about how economic demand for wood encourages more productive forest management, how working forests are part of the solution for climate change, and how forestry professionals want builders to find a way to store wood products for longer than rotation, basically keeping wood in buildings for as long as possible. And what does that mean? And I think that means that the wood industry, if the wood industry can provide wood from responsibly managed forests, and if the building industry can provide the demand for wood, then we could have a potential solution for climate change, or at least a part of the solution. So if these two industries can work together, I think that'd be really great. So I think that was something that the wood speakers, wood experts were like implying. And we also received a lot of questions submitted from the audience, and we weren't able to answer all the questions during the webinars, but we asked the speakers to answer the questions offline, and we collected all of the questions and answers and published them on the website. So you can find all of that really good information on the website. Here's an example of the top 10 questions, and here's an example of the answers that we got. And that's all I have. And this is where you can find all of the recordings and slides and Q&As. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Monica. I'd remind everyone that you are welcome to type any questions on the chat function. And if you would like to ask the question yourself, please put a stack. We will try to do that for the last part of this session instead of right now, just to keep everything moving. And Kate just put on the chat function the link to where you can find all this information that Monica was referring to. Okay. No questions yet. Let's move on then to Mike. If we don't have any questions, you can ask later to Monica questions as well. So let's go and introduce Michael Grinick. Mike is an associate and practicing structural engineer at LeMessurier in Boston and currently serves as the chair of the SE 2050 committee of the Structural Engineering Institute of the American Society of Civil Engineers. The SE 2050 commitment is a developing national program that asks structural engineers and structural engineering firms to accelerate the embodied carbon reductions in structural systems through three main activities: planning, implementing, and sharing. The program is expected to launch, the program launched in November 2020. Michael will present on its development plan, the launch, and he will go through the website actually, and how you can join the movement to net zero embodied carbon structural systems by 2050. Mike? I know this bio was updated.
I was, well, yeah, I was
Updated.
just saying, you pretty much gave the whole presentation right there.
Oh,
so
okay, yeah, sure.
So you can see my screen, I assume? Is that correct?
Not right now.
Yeah, we cannot see your screen.
Okay. Oh, I see. I got to hit the button that says share.
There you go.
Okay. Thank you, Victoria. Really appreciate the opportunity to give you a few minute update. I'm going to just show a couple of slides, and then I'd like to spend the rest of the 5 or 8 minutes on the website that we launched. My name is Mike Grinick, and Victoria already gave the background. I am representing the Structural Engineering Institute. For those that don't know, the Structural Engineering Institute is the main structural engineering arm of the American Society of Civil Engineers, which has a number of different institutes like structural, geotechnical, architectural engineering, all of that stuff. So this is one arm of a very large organization. And within the Structural Engineering Institute, we are part of what's called the Structural Engineering Institute's Sustainability Committee. And that's really where SE 2050 lives right now. So I'm gonna take about 10 seconds and talk about 12 years of history. So the SE 2050 commitment program that SEI has just launched is the formal response to the Carbon Leadership Forum's SE 2050 challenge. So Carbon Leadership Forum incubated this idea. The whole concept of SE 2050 is the Carbon Leadership Forum's concept. And they reached out a couple of years ago to different organizations, and we were one of them, to try to bring a broader audience of structural engineers into the fold. And this is sort of consistent with the Carbon Leadership Forum's, incubation group. And so we're very proud to be born out of the Carbon Leadership Forum. So like I said, fast forward to now, we just launched the program. We think it's the first and only national program which is specifically focused on structural engineering firm commitments. So not just individual structural engineers, but the firm itself. And so we think that will lead to a much broader capture of the structural engineering community by getting whole firms to sign on. You may or may not know this, but the main thrust of the program is to get structural engineering firms to design net zero embodied carbon designs by the year 2050. And we just launched less than a month ago at Greenville. At a high level, we look at the program as sort of a two-way street commitment. So it's something that we're asking something of the signatories, and we're also providing the signatories something. So we're asking the signatories to create what's called an embodied carbon action plan. This is somewhat analogous to the Sustainability Action Plan of AIA 2030, which is roughly what SE 2050 is modeled after. For the ECAP, we are asking specifically for education, strategies, reporting, and advocacy within the firm. So we really want to attack the firm culture and make sure from the inside out, the staff, the leadership is all on board with what embodied carbon is. How do we measure it? How do we reduce it? And advocate that out to our clients. A big piece of this is the reporting component. And we are, I don't need to explain to this audience, but there's a large void of data out there in terms of, people are talking about establishing different benchmarks and getting to zero by a certain timeline, but we all know that we can't really do that unless we know where we are today. So we are looking for a large collection of design data from these firms. And we also want to do it in a collaborative way. I mean, there's about 450 different databases under development right now, or at least it seems that way. And so if we can find a way to mesh them all together, I mean, that would be an ideal scenario. But we simply can't ask firms to do all this without giving them something. And we also recognize that there's a huge range of structural engineering firms out there, right? All the firms represented by the CLF or on this call are fairly well educated, if not leading some of these initiatives. But there are the overwhelming majority of structural firms that exist out there either don't know what embodied carbon is, or really might not even know how they can be part of this discussion. So we really want to provide those organizations the resources that they need. And we have a good group within SE 2050 working specifically on resources. This is a developing section of SE 2050. It's going to take a while to really populate all the different areas we want to include. But our focus is to include structural specific items in the hope that these resources will help educate and sort of move the dialogue along in the structural engineering world. Two things I would highlight here is we have, I am not going to call this a tool. It's an embodied carbon estimator. It's called ECOM, which is really just a glorified spreadsheet on our website, but it's super simple to use, and we consider it a way for structural engineers or anybody really just to get an order of magnitude impact of a particular structural material or system, and it can be used to educate yourself. It can also be used to back check more robust analyses like you would find with EC3 or Tally or all of those programs you're all aware of. We also want to educate or get the structural engineering community thinking about the embodied carbon intensities, right? So if you ask any structural engineer, they'll be able to tell you typical pounds per square foot of steel for an office building, but they would not be able to tell you, nor would a lot of people be able to tell you what the typical embodied carbon is for that particular framing scheme. So we're providing some baseline figures for that. And of course, we're linking to the CLF forum. We have a separate structures, I don't know what you call it, group on the CLF forum, and so we're pushing traffic there. And then ultimately we would like to, with consultation with the carbon community, to establish some benchmarks and some appropriate reduction targets. I will tell you the current status is we have 8 firms signed up in 1 month, and that number might seem low, but I'd like to remind everyone that to get a firm to sign up, you have to have a firm executive, vice president, president, or CEO sign a letter and send it to the director of the Structural Engineering Institute. And if you know anything about structural engineering firms, that's not always the easiest task to do. So I would say in 1 month, we're pretty excited about where we're at. Ideally, at the end of next year, we'd have 50 to 60 firms signed up. So we think we can, it's ambitious, but we think we can get there. Right now, we have 400 individuals signed up to our newsletter. So we're developing some momentum. And I would say we would respectfully ask of you to help us get the word out. You can sign up to our newsletter and get monthly-ish updates. You can send the web address to your structural engineer and specifically say, have you seen this? It's amazing, and see what they say to try to get them involved. You yourself can get involved if you're a structural engineer. You can apply to join the committee. You can join our advisor group if you're not a structural engineer, or if you're a structural engineer. If you'd like to sponsor us, there are sponsorship opportunities. And then since it's the end of the year and we all have piles of cash laying around, this is probably a good time to donate and get your tax deductible donation in under the wire. So I'll leave it there. Victoria, I don't know how much time we have to show the website. Is there time to show the website?
I was thinking maybe on the Yeah, either way, Anthony, I don't know. Either way, we can do it later in the other section, or you can walk us through right now.
It'd be like a 2-minute highlight.
All right, 2-minute highlight. I will highlight the two things that I mentioned. One, here's our embodied carbon estimator. And as I said, this is for education purposes, to back check more formal analysis, and to be quite candid, to drive traffic to the website. But if you wanted to, you could just plug in and say you had a 60,000 square foot building, and you had 600 yards of that, 600 yards of lightweight, you had 35 tons of bar, and for some reason you had 26 tons of rolled shapes. It'll give you the breakdown of embodied carbon in pounds and kilograms, and then the percent total of the whole. And then given the area that you plug in, you can just quickly get the embodied carbon intensity, either in pounds per square foot or kilograms per meter squared. Again, I can't stress this enough. This is not a tool. This is not something you'd submit to, to get your lead points, but it really can give you a very quick order of magnitude. And frankly, I've used it a few times to back check some of my tally analysis, and it has helped me find a mistake in my tally analysis. So that's sort of the use case we see for that. And then if you're a structural engineer, one thing we wanted to highlight was the embodied carbon intensity diagram. So, if you're designing an office building out of steel, in an ideal world, we have a lot of different diagrams. Right now we have 3. And so you could come in here and look at a 30 by 45 foot bay of steel framing. We had 3 engineers design this, and surprise, surprise, not every structural engineer comes up with the same sizes. So we have a range of sizes. And we also had 3 different people run LCA analyses. So the idea is that we wanted to provide the audience a range of structural material quantities, as well as a range of embodied carbon impacts. And so I'm going to leave it there because I really want to be respectful of other people's time. So if we want to explore this more, we can after. And so I just want to thank you for that extra time, Anthony and Victoria.
Thank you. And we actually have a few questions, but since we want to get to everybody, let's go over to Megan, and we will cover questions for Mike after Megan's update presentation, if that is okay with everyone. So Megan Lewis, she's a senior researcher at the Carbon Leadership Forum and a licensed architect. She leads research on procurement of low carbon materials and how public and private embodied carbon policy can support the rapid decarbonization of building materials and construction. Previous to joining the Carbon Leadership Forum, Megan was the head of global energy and sustainability at WeWork, where she also launched the Supply Chain Sustainability Program in 2018 to lead the development of the company's sustainability procurement program and practices. Before joining WeWork, Megan was a practicing architect at Mithim, where she worked on a range of project types and led internal efforts to integrate LCA and low carbon material selection into the design process through R+D implementation on active projects. Megan began working with the Carbon Leadership Forum as a volunteer in 2016 as a contributing editor to the practice guide for the life cycle assessment of buildings. Megan?
Hi, can you hear me and see the screen? Great. Okay, so I'm just going to give a really brief overview of some of the embodied carbon policy work that the Carbon Leadership Forum is beginning to spend significantly more time on. I think I'm going to talk about some of the different policy options out there, but I like to say that I think the fact that there can be an entire person dedicated to focusing on policy is an indication of how exciting this area is becoming, and that there's a lot to look forward to in 2021. So on the right here, this is just looking at public procurement policies that are currently being explored. So often referred to as BICLEAN, but also they share other names like LECLA or just, low carbon procurement policy. And this is an area where we're seeing a lot of growth in 2021, and an area where we're spending some time doing research and supporting model policy language development. So many of you are probably familiar with BICLEAN California, which was the first of these kinds of laws to be passed in 2017. And then you can see other areas here where policies are currently being explored or have been in the past, and then highlighting some of the cities where there's sort of local iterations of this. So I get this question a lot. It's like, why, well, aren't there other kinds of policies? Yes, there definitely are a lot of other ones. So I just want to highlight a few of them that you should look out for in 2021, because they're either already happening or they're coming soon. So climate action plans is an exciting area. I'm sure some of you were at the same talks that I was this week, where we got to hear about Vancouver's climate action plan that included embodied carbon. There's a number of other ones that are either being reviewed and will be adopted this year, or who have already adopted embodied carbon, like King County, where Seattle is located. Building codes are also an area. So Marin County passed the first building code that includes embodied carbon. But at the state and city level, there are conversations happening across the country around where there are other opportunities to have embodied carbon be included in building code. There's also city zoning, land use, and building regulations and incentives. So I think at the city level, there's the bigger opportunity to focus on buildings as a whole, rather than just on materials themselves, which I'll talk a little bit about in a second. And then as well as building and material reuse policies. And then last, there's also executive orders for expanding the mandate of agencies to address embodied carbon. So we often think, obviously, of federal executive orders, which there is an opportunity for, but these also happen at the state level. So Washington State, for example, has an executive order that expands the mandate of government agencies to focus on embodied carbon. And that can be a really important step in allowing a transportation agency, for example, or one that builds public buildings to expand their focus to include embodied carbon. So many of you have probably seen this slide before in terms of how we think about where there are opportunities to reduce embodied carbon throughout a typical project cycle. So starting before you even build the project, when you're just thinking about, can I reuse a building? Can I make this building of a smaller footprint? Should we be thinking about design for disassembly, sort of the highest level? And then as the building starts to come into focus, it's really important to be working with great engineers like the ones in SE 2050 and thinking about building strategies at the level of the system. And then last, making sure that all of that gets taken into when you build your building, making sure the materials that you've thought about throughout this process are procured and the lower carbon option is selected when there is one. And so there are lots of tools that we are more familiar with starting with rules of thumb and then using whole building life cycle assessment tools, like Tally, Athena, OneClick, many that you're all familiar with, and then newer tools like EC3, as well as EPDs. EPDs are a tool, even though they're also, like a disclosure mechanism. But then there's also different policies that are relevant for each of these steps along the way. And so when you hear about an embodied carbon policy, that's one thing to think about. It's where is this sort of inserting itself into the overall strategies? Because they're not all going to be the same, and we don't need them to be the same because they need to affect these sort of different stages. And then just to end on sort of what we're doing, like how the Carbon Leadership Forum is trying to contribute to this body of research that supports supports effective policies being put in place. And a big part of that is educational resources. So, as this community is very aware, the embodied carbon can be quite technical and sometimes confusing. And so imagine as an architect who's already really familiar, or an engineer who already knows everything about building materials and the construction cycle, imagine being a policymaker that is starting with not even any of that background information about deep knowledge in the construction sector. And so what we're trying to do is be able to provide sort of quick resources for anyone coming from, whether it's someone who's spent their whole life focusing on operational energy and now needs to understand embodied carbon, or if it's someone who hasn't focused on either and doesn't even understand why buildings need to be a part of the climate policy. And so it's really exciting to take what we've learned about educating, because at the Carbon Leadership Forum, I think we have spent more time thinking about educating architects, engineers, contractors, and then taking a step back and bringing that education to a broader audience. And training is sort of related to that. And then model policy language is developing the language that can be used in these bills, which is thinking about things like how do you write a sentence that tells someone what kind of EPD to include to prove that they've, deserve an incentive, for example. So that's where it gets really wonky, which is a fun part of it, but we're excited to be able to provide this expertise. And there's a lot of need for it that we found at the federal, state, and local level, people looking for advice on how to do this in an effective way. And I just gave a couple of teasers of things to look out for next year. We're working towards having a policy home on the CLF webpage. So if you have a question, you can go and try to find things a little quicker, as well as expanding some of this work to show how it can be used in the private sector as well, because we tend to think of policy as actually public and private policy. So if you're a building owner in a government agency, there's similar tools to being a building owner in the private sector. And then last, just more resources. So the first 5 are listed here that we're going to be publishing by the end of the year, but then we'll be adding more to that. And I think, we've all been to a lot of free webinars this year, and Zoom has really become an integral part of our everyday life. And we're looking for ways to really explore new ways of communicating to work within this new world that we're living in. So if you see something that you find really effective, like a new way, whether it's oh, this person did a 5-minute video and that was so much more effective to me than this, like we're thinking about that a lot. And so I'm always curious to hear people's ideas on that, because we have to figure out how to keep sharing information even when we have a lot thrown at us. So on that note, I'll pass it back, I think, just to the group to talk to questions.
Yeah, thank you, Megan. Anthony, if you want to put back the
I'll pop the screen
presentation
up.
slide. And yeah, we have a bunch of questions already, and now is your time as well to keep putting in the chat more questions, and or write stack in front of it so you can ask the question directly, or make a comment or suggestion, or cheer up to any of our speaker. So Anthony, you want to go with the first question?
Sure. So I was thinking, I'm curious if Mike has had an opportunity to kind of review some of the questions that came in and think about ways to kind of start prioritizing ways to answer them, or should we just go one by one? What works for you, Mike?
Yeah, I see 3, 2 from Solomon and 1 from Laura, and I can address those relatively quickly if you'd like.
Cool, that would be great.
So Solomon asked, how many LCAs have been uploaded to the SC 2050 website? When will the first results benchmark numbers be released? So the answer is 0. And that's not the 0 we're trying to commit to, just as an FYI. We just signed up we're about to sign up a database vendor to develop it. And the database, we see it as 2 phases. One, we're calling it the beta database, which will be available to start uploading data to probably early spring, maybe hopefully sooner. But it always takes longer than we think. And that will be just collecting global warming potential numbers and then some basic structural information. And then towards the end of the year into the following year, we're going to start collecting structural material quantities, which is a whole nother, can of worms. In terms of establishing benchmarks, to be candid, I think we're a ways off from that. I think there's a tremendous amount of data that we need to collect before that becomes relevant. Plus, we have to bring a coalition of different stakeholders into the mix to establish those numbers. But that's why we need your help getting the word out to collect this information. That is also why we're trying to provide those embodied carbon intensity diagrams in the interim, where we can actually say for sure particular SMQ or embodied carbon for a structural system. So Solomon asked another question. Solomon's been very active. Will firms upload LCAs to SC 2050 include the footprint of non-structural elements such as CMU, partitions, facades, or concrete toppings over CLT? These kinds of non-structural items would significantly impact the establishment of benchmarks. I would say right now we're focusing on structural materials only, and perhaps over time we could include the other items, but we're really trying to keep it as simple as possible right now. So, however, concrete topping over a CLT we would consider as part of the structural system because it's likely there for vibration or acoustic treatment. So it is technically part of a structural system, you could say. And then finally, Laura asked, what are the long-term goals of SC 2050 to modify, improve code and policy to reduce embodied carbon? Is there a goal to regulate embodied carbon via code provisions, same as how operational carbon is regulated via green building codes? The short answer is no. Our organization is trying to get firms on board with this whole thing and educate them and collect the information and disseminate it and provide them those benchmarks and targets for reduction. But we actually look to groups like the CLF to really focus on the policy aspect and the policy side of things, and to provide those organizations that are making those decisions as much information as they need to establish realistic and relevant code requirements. So those are the three I see. 3 questions.
Thanks, Mike.
Sure.
So just a couple logistic things as we continue this conversation, and I'll let you hop in real quick, Megan. If you're asking questions, or even if you're not asking questions, we'd love to see everybody's faces right now, so it feels kind of like a dialogue. We called it a Q&A, but we'd love for it to be as much of a conversation as possible. And the other piece is that Kate is showing us how to use the stack process that Victoria had encouraged us to set up earlier. When you have a question, if you don't want to write it in the chat, you can just write stack, and then we'll call on you. So Kate, can we get to you in just a second and let Megan respond to what Mike just said? Great.
I was actually going to respond to a few of the other questions that were about the policy resources, because one of them I'm very excited about is that it would be great if that map were interactive and could take you directly to the language of the policy. This is something we've talked about a lot, so I'm not allowed to overpromise things, so I can't say that we'll definitely have it, but it's something we've been thinking about. And then just highlighting where Anthony's response to Solomon's question about where we can find more info on embodied carbon policies that are currently passed or proposed. And that's something that we want to include in that sort of policy home, because that is a question that we've gotten a lot, like what are the differences between these different policies, because they fit within a framework of how these are being set up, but they are different and they have different incentives. Some regulate, some don't set standards and just require disclosure. And so that's one of the big focus areas for us in terms of bringing in quick information about what that is to this community and to the general community. So, Kate?
Okay, well, I just wanted to sort of join in and ask about, so I'm super excited about the movement of acting in both a policy, and I would actually call the SC 2050 action a sort of a policy in a framework, right? So it's a policy within an industry organization, and the sharing of data to lead towards this desired future state where there is benchmarks. So I guess I'd be curious for both Megan and Michael to talk about how this future state. So what we let's pick 3 years from now. If structural engineers are reporting data, architects are probably reporting data too, researchers are reporting data, and policy results in data. So what could all this data bring together? Megan's got her mic off, so I can ask her first, and then.
Well, I'm very excited about this 3 years in the future state, Kate, because with all this beautiful data that's been collected, then new policies will be possible, for example, and that again, reiterating Kate's point, private or public policies that could say for buildings, for the building that I'm building, me, the owner, per square foot, I'm going to say that I want the total carbon for this building to be below this amount per square foot. So that's an example of what could happen once we have enough data that would be able to set that kind of building level scope. Instead of trying to reduce from a percentage, we could say, this is that benchmark that I want to be working below. And well, okay, I'm going to pause there and let Mike answer.
Well, I would actually say something very simple, is to say that in my experience talking to different structural engineers and different owners and different architects, no one knows where we're supposed to be or where are we, what design data, what are the values in the design results of your LCA, like what do they mean, right? What does any of this mean? And no one as far as I can tell, can really give a good response to that. And I think at a very high level, I would say that I don't even like calling them benchmarks, frankly. I like calling them averages, or that's probably not the right way to say it. But the impact of structural materials is so region dependent that some of these high level national numbers are kind of bogus, right? I mean, they don't really make a lot of sense. So our hope is that, you know, we can start looking at different parts of the country and start telling the story, frankly. I mean, we don't know what the story is. We think we have a rough idea, but, you know, so I think I don't want to get too specific, because to a certain extent, we're still learning as we go. But our understanding is that to ask, in good conscience, ask somebody to hit a particular target, we need to know where they are, and where they are, and tracking that would at least allow us to figure out what is possible, because we don't really know what is possible. And so we're also hoping that it would send signals to the market to say, you know, hey, like, this is where we need to be. What can you give us to get these numbers down? So that's pretty high level.
Yeah, and I'd add a couple of things onto that, which is that about telling the story, like you mentioned. So right now, both building owners, like companies that have set commitments or targets related to this, as well as manufacturers who are putting time and money into working on this, right now it's really hard for them to tell that story because of this. When data does exist, it's on its own, so you don't have a way to understand whether it's good or bad. And so I think right now we're really focusing on getting that data, because it's not really appropriate to use it necessarily for, well, it can definitely be a challenge to use for comparisons, which I don't want to get into now, because that could be a whole hour conversation. But it's also not in a place where you can say, I did this, and this is what that resulted in a way that is being communicated and measured the same way. And so that means that governments can set targets and actually meet them and show how they're making progress towards meeting them, the same way that architects and engineers and manufacturers and everyone can sort of be on the same page about reaching those goals.
Thank you, Megan. I kind of have a question for Monica about the wood seminars. So I saw on the 10 questions that you put on the slide, like the number 9, I think it was, with the industry kind of going towards more carbon storing materials and maybe using mass timber for a lot of structures as well. How is, like, if suddenly a lot of people decided to use mass timber, like how our forest will be doing, like will be, because it seems like it's a growth all the time, or it's growing, it has been growing at least in North America. But if suddenly everybody decides to use mass timber, was a discussion of how our forests were doing? Not to put you on the spot if you don't have the answer.
Well, I'm not qualified to answer. I'm not a wood expert or economist, but based on what the speakers were trying to communicate, it sounds like if you increase demand for wood, if you use more mass timber, the forest owners will meet that demand by producing more wood. And sounds like there's plenty of wood to go around, and increasing demand for wood through the use of mass timber will encourage more productive forest management. So that's my theory based on what they were telling us.
Kate, do you have something to add to that?
Oh, I think Monica did a great job, but I want to just highlight that there's different scales at looking at this problem. There's scales at the national level, the global level, a specific product, a specific forest or state. And so the answer that Monica was giving really was sort of at a national scale. And so I guess I encourage you to, if you want to get into more of those details, watch some of those videos or read more details of the Q&As, because there's a lot of nuance there. And a lot of good work that's happening, and also more data that we need.
Yeah, thank you.
I've got another wood carbon seminars
Yeah.
question, if I could ask it. Monica, you brought up this kind of recommendation that was made to not frame the conversation in net zero terminology. And there was alternative terminology that you were using. And I'm just curious, is that focused around buildings, or is that focused around forest management when you're talking about net zero? And the better way for us to be talking about carbon storing, capturing, preventing from being emitted, or whatever it might be?
I think for both for forests and for buildings. Yeah.
Okay, any more questions? I see some activity also in the chat, people responding some of the questions there. If you think that there is something that should be brought up, I think, Anthony, the one that you answer about the policies being available, I don't know if Megan answered that or not, that you said that it was going to be available in the CLF's website. Where was, oh, where we can find more info on embodied carbon policy. You responded that.
Yeah, that's what I was talking about earlier. So we're launching a new policy home. We'll locate all of that. Yeah.
Great, thank you.
I see that Martine's got a question or comment.
Yeah, I had a question for Mike. So with a bunch of people, like as you start to get LCAs in, as you start to collect data, it's coming from a lot of different places, a lot of different people using different tools with different data. So how are you going to sort of harmonize? Like some people are doing LCA with Athena, One-Click, Tally, and those are going to have pretty different results. Some people, and I know like EC3 incorporates uncertainty kind of to a loose degree, but how does that work? Because like I've done projects where I run effectively the same building through two different softwares and get pretty different absolute results.
Well, Martin, we've cracked the code here at SC 2050, and we're going to, we have a magic number that just is going to combine. No, I'm just kidding. So, Martine, it's a really, really good question. We've thought about that a lot. And honestly, the simplest thing we're going to do is let people send us results from whatever LCA program they use. However, we are then we think it only appropriate to establish, any sort of results based on the source of the data. So we're not going to mix and match the results. Now, this is in the beta version where we're just collecting LCA. The second version, which is going to include structural material quantities, will allow us, because the structural material quantities would not vary between different LCA softwares. And so that allows us to sort of have that sort of link between all of the different results. And so there'll be an opportunity to manipulate the data. And our long-term hope is that we could use any particular source of data we want and marry up to the SMQs and then produce the results that way. So a huge, huge part of that is, and this is where the structural part gets really dicey, is that there are an infinite number of structural material components and materials. And so we're trying to offer the profession a consistent way to collect that information. So in an ideal world, there is alignment between us and Tally, Athena, EC3, like we're all sort of speaking the same language. It won't be easy, and I don't think we're going to ever get 100% consensus, but we are making some recommendations on how to organize those structural material quantities. And the structural material quantities also allows us it gives us a forum to back check things. If you just are collecting LCA data, you don't really know if it makes sense because you have nothing what are you going to compare it to? So if we have SMQs, we as structural engineers know what should be appropriate numbers already today. So that's sort of our backstop, if you will.
Yeah, that's awesome. I guess if you have the structural quantities, even as impact data gets updated and kind of is more robust and more region specific, that can.
Right, because the material quantities, the material quantities aren't going to change significantly, although in the interest of full disclosure, the structural engineering profession is also pushing performance-based designs for various things like, wind and fire. And so there are changes to the code, but we don't see those to be as substantial as potentially how the LCI data is going to change over time. So.
Yeah, and I just wanted to add to that as well, because I think that fits into what Kate was mentioning in terms of this like better data future that we're all building towards, which is that the difference in those tools, that shouldn't be put on designers and groups like SC 2050 to be figuring out the difference. And what would solve that is the underlying data sets data sets being aligned. And that's what's really exciting about federal policy becoming interested in this, because they have the ability to think about the sort of underlying data for North America or for the United States. And then it's not getting to you and Mike trying to figure out how to make these data sets work together, because that's not your job.
And we have Kate that I don't know if it is related to this, and Ryan that wants to also ask something. So Kate, if you're related to this conversation, go ahead.
Just a
Then
quick
we have
plug.
Ryan.
Just a quick plug, the EC3 tool is now hosted by Building Transparency as a nonprofit, and that within collaboration with Building Transparency, the Carbon Leadership Forum is helping to look for and advance for funding for open data, so open LCA data, so at a national scale, as well as the background LCI data for the US so there's work happening to try and provide free, available, consistent representative LCA data for the US.
Yeah, and just building on that, there is an initiative in Canada now called LCA Squared that the federal government in Canada is leading. And there is already a very detailed draft whole building LCA guideline that has been created. It's not finalized yet, but it's going to be released in the new year more broadly. And we're going to be looking for folks who are interested in field testing it on their projects. So that we're viewing that as North America's first detailed guideline to how to actually do a whole building LCA. So I think that will hopefully bring a lot more consistency once we all have the same playbook that we're using. So keep your eyes out for that.
Thank you very much, Ryan. And we are running out of time. There is other links and more information that has been put in the chat. If you want to save the chat, go to the little dots there where you can type the question, and you can save the chat conversation so you have all the information on your computer from this conversation today. I want to thank Megan and Monica and Mike for having shared their knowledge and updates with the Carbon Leadership Forum and the SC 2050 initiative. And I just wanted to let everybody know that look forward 2021 with this kind of format, the same. So be prepared to share your screen, your camera, and be part of the discussion, because we're looking for connecting with people and hear more from everybody what you're doing and what can we help you with. So Anthony, if you want to say anything else, but thank you everyone.
I think you covered it. Thank you, Victoria. A lot of these topics are really interesting, and we're clearly going to be working more on them in 2021. So just keep an eye out for more webinars, more materials, resources, research, etc. around these topics, because they're ones that we're excited to be digging more into. So thanks everyone. Enjoy your weekend. Have a happy holiday, and we will see you in 2021.
Thank you.